Once upon a time, in a distant land, there lived a young man named Jacob, born into a family with a rich heritage. His father Isaac was a quiet, wise man, and his mother Rebekah was a woman of deep faith. Jacob had a twin brother, Esau, who was older by mere moments. Esau was a skilled hunter, wild and rugged, while Jacob preferred the peace of home, tending to the flocks and helping his mother. From birth, there was tension between the two brothers. Esau, as the eldest, was entitled to the family's birthright, a sacred inheritance that included leadership of the family and a special blessing from their father. But Jacob, always clever and thoughtful, longed for that privilege. One day, when Esau came home from hunting, famished and exhausted, Jacob saw an opportunity. As Esau begged for a bowl of the stew Jacob was cooking, Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright, and you can have it." Esau, driven by hunger and recklessness, agreed, sealing the deal with a casual nod, unaware of how significant the trade would become. Years passed, and as their father Isaac grew old and blind, the time came for him to give the final blessing to his eldest son. But Rebekah, who favored Jacob, devised a plan. She told Jacob to dress in Esau's clothes and cover his arms with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairy skin. Then, he was to bring a meal to his father and pretend to be Esau, to receive the blessing instead. Jacob, nervous but eager, followed through. His heart pounded as he approached his father's tent. Isaac, though suspicious, was convinced by Jacob's disguise. He stretched out his hands, laid them on Jacob's head, and gave him the sacred blessing meant for Esau, the promise of wealth, leadership, and divine favor. But the joy of success quickly turned to fear. When Esau discovered what Jacob had done, his rage was fierce. "I will kill Jacob for stealing what was mine," Esau vowed. Hearing this, Rebekah urged Jacob to flee to her brother Laban's house in a distant land until Esau's anger subsided. Jacob, now a fugitive, set out on a long journey. One night, as he rested with a stone for a pillow, Jacob had a dream. In his dream, a ladder stretched from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. At the top stood God, who spoke to Jacob, saying, "I am the God of your ancestors. I will be with you, and your descendants will inherit this land." Jacob awoke, awestruck by the vision, and named the place Bethel, meaning house of God. Eventually, Jacob reached his uncle Laban's home, where he found refuge. There, he met Laban's daughters Leah and Rachel. Jacob immediately fell in love with Rachel, her beauty capturing his heart. He asked Laban for her hand in marriage, and Laban agreed, but on one condition. Jacob would have to work for him for 7 years. Those 7 years felt like days to Jacob, for his love for Rachel was deep. But on the wedding night, Laban deceived Jacob. Instead of Rachel, Laban gave him Leah, the older sister, as his bride. Jacob was furious, but Laban argued, "In our land, the elder daughter must marry first." Determined, Jacob agreed to work another 7 years for Rachel's hand. At last, after 14 long years, Jacob married Rachel, and together they began to build a family. Leah, Rachel, and their maidservants bore Jacob 12 sons, each destined to lead a great tribe. Years passed, and Jacob grew wealthy under Laban's service, but tensions rose between them. Sensing it was time to return home, Jacob gathered his family and flocks and began the journey back to Canaan, the land of his birth. But one fear lingered in his heart: Esau. Would his brother still seek revenge? As he neared home, Jacob sent gifts ahead to Esau, hoping to appease him. That night, alone by a riverbank, Jacob was visited by a mysterious figure, a man who wrestled with him until dawn. Jacob wrestled with all his might, refusing to let go. As the sun began to rise, the stranger touched Jacob's hip, dislocating it, but still Jacob would not release him. "Let me go, for it is daybreak," the man said. "I will not let you go until you bless me," Jacob replied. The man then said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and with men, and have overcome." With that, the man blessed him and disappeared. Jacob, now limping but transformed, approached Esau with humility. To his surprise, Esau ran to meet him, embracing him with tears of joy. The years of bitterness melted away in that moment of reconciliation. Jacob, now called Israel, settled in the land of Canaan, raising his 12 sons, the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel. His journey, marked by struggle, deception, and divine encounters, had shaped him into the father of a great nation, chosen by God. And though his life had been full of trials, Jacob learned that through perseverance and faith, Even the most broken relationships could be healed, and the greatest blessings could come from the most unexpected places. Long ago, when the earth was still young, people had grown wicked and corrupt. They turned away from kindness and goodness, filling their hearts with evil thoughts and violent actions. Greed, dishonesty, and cruelty spread across the land, and soon the world was consumed by wickedness. The earth, once a place of beauty, had become darkened by sin. God, who had created the earth and all living creatures, watched the world he loved fall into chaos. His heart was filled with sorrow as he saw how far humanity had strayed from his ways. The people were no longer following the path of righteousness, and the earth was filled with violence. In his sadness, God decided that it was time to cleanse the earth and start anew. But there was one man who was different from the rest, a man named Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Despite the world's corruption, Noah remained devoted to living a good and faithful life. Because of this, God looked upon Noah with favor. God spoke to Noah one day, revealing his plan. "I'm going to put an end to all people," God said. "The earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm going to destroy both them and the earth." But God, in his mercy, had a plan to save Noah and his family. He instructed Noah to build an enormous ark, a great wooden ship that would carry Noah, his family, and pairs of animals from every species through the coming storm. God gave Noah detailed instruction on how to build the ark. It was to be made from cypress wood and covered with pitch inside and out to make it waterproof. The ark would be 300 cubits long, about 450 feet, 50 cubits wide, about 75 feet, and 30 cubits high, about 45 feet. It was to have 3 levels and rooms for Noah, his family, and the animals, with a door in the side and a roof for shelter. God told Noah that he would send a great flood to cover the earth, to wipe out all life. But Noah and those with him in the ark would be saved. "You shall bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you," God instructed. "Of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground, 2 of each will come to you to be kept alive." Though Noah didn't fully understand God's plan, he trusted in him completely. He knew that God's words were true, and so, with unwavering faith, Noah set to work. Noah began the monumental task of building the ark, just as God had commanded. His 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, helped him, and together they worked day and night to construct the massive boat. The people around them were confused and mocked Noah for building such a huge ship, especially since there was no sign of rain. They didn't believe a flood was coming and thought Noah had lost his mind. But Noah was not swayed by their words. He continued to follow God's instructions, trusting that God's plan was for the greater good. For many years, Noah and his family worked tirelessly on the ark, gathering materials, cutting wood, and crafting the ship exactly as God had told them. When the ark was finally completed, Noah began gathering food, enough to feed his family and all the animals that would come aboard. The ark was ready, and so was Noah, trusting that God would soon fulfill his word. At last, God spoke to Noah again. "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. Take also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth." As Noah gathered the animals, something miraculous happened. The animals came to Noah, 2 by 2. Lions and lambs, elephants and birds, insects and reptiles. All the creatures of the earth made their way to the ark, as if they knew they were being saved. Noah led them into the ark, placing them in their special rooms. When everything was ready, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives entered the ark. God, watching over them, shut the door of the ark, sealing them inside. Then the rain began to fall. At first, it was just a light drizzle, but soon the sky opened, and rain poured down with great force. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. The waters rose higher and higher, until even the highest mountains were submerged. The entire earth was covered with water, and everything outside the ark was destroyed. Every living creature that walked on land or flew in the sky perished in the great flood. Only Noah, his family, and the animals inside the ark were safe. For 150 days, the waters covered the earth, and the ark floated on the vast, endless sea. Inside the ark, Noah and his family cared for the animals, feeding them and making sure they were safe and healthy. It was a long time to be confined inside the ark, but Noah remained patient, trusting that God would guide them to safety. Eventually, God remembered Noah and sent a great wind to blow across the earth. Slowly, the floodwaters began to recede. After many months, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The water continued to go down, and after 40 more days, Noah opened a window in the ark and sent out a raven. The raven flew back and forth, but it didn't return, finding no place to rest. Next, Noah sent out a dove to see if the water had dried up from the earth. The dove returned, unable to find dry land. Noah waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. This time, the dove returned with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak. Noah knew that the waters had receded, and soon the earth would be dry again. 7 days later, Noah sent out the dove once more, and it did not return. The land was finally ready for life to begin again. When the earth was completely dry, God told Noah to come out of the ark, along with his family and all the animals. After months of waiting, they stepped out onto dry land, breathing in the fresh air of a new world. Noah, filled with gratitude, built an altar to God and offered sacrifices, thanking him for his protection and mercy. God was pleased with Noah's offering and made a covenant with him. He promised never again to destroy the earth with a flood. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease, God said. As a sign of his promise, God placed a rainbow in the sky. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember the covenant between me and the earth, God said. Never again will a flood destroy all life on earth. From that day on, the rainbow became a symbol of God's enduring promise to protect the world and its people. Noah and his family went on to live long lives, and their descendants filled the earth once more. In the land of Israel, long ago, lived a humble young shepherd named David. He was the youngest of 8 sons of a man named Jesse. While David spent his days tending sheep in the fields, God was watching him closely. Israel's king Saul had disobeyed God, and God decided to find a new king, a man whose heart was faithful. He sent the prophet Samuel to Jesse's house to anoint one of his sons. To everyone's surprise, it wasn't Jesse's eldest strong sons who were chosen, but David, the youngest and smallest. Samuel anointed David in secret, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. David's life, however, remained simple for a while. He returned to the fields, watching over his father's sheep. But soon, a great threat appeared in Israel. The Philistines, enemies of Israel, sent their fiercest warrior to challenge the Israelites, Goliath, a giant of a man who stood over 9 feet tall. For 40 days, Goliath taunted the armies of Israel, daring someone to fight him. But no one was brave enough to step forward until David arrived. David had come to bring food to his brothers who were in the army, but when he heard Goliath's insults, he was outraged. "Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" he asked. Though young and inexperienced in battle, David believed that God would give him the victory. Refusing the king's heavy armor, David went out to face Goliath with nothing but his sling and 5 smooth stones. As Goliath approached, mocking David's youth, David stood firm. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." With that, David swung his sling and released a stone. It struck Goliath in the forehead, and the giant fell to the ground, defeated. David's bravery and trust in God became legendary. From that moment, David's life changed. King Saul invited David to his court, where he played the harp to soothe the king's troubled spirit. David also became a great warrior, leading Israel to many victories. But as David's fame grew, Saul became jealous. The people sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." In his jealousy, Saul tried to kill David. David fled and spent years hiding in the wilderness, pursued by Saul. Despite this, when David had the chance to kill Saul, he refused, saying, "I will not harm the Lord's anointed." David trusted that God would make him king in his own time. After Saul's death in battle, David became king of Judah and eventually king over all of Israel. He ruled from Jerusalem, the city he made the nation's capital, and brought the Ark of the Covenant there, celebrating with all his might before the Lord. David wanted to build a temple for God, but God had a different plan. Through the prophet Nathan, God promised David that his kingdom would last forever. One of David's descendants would sit on the throne for all eternity. This was God's covenant with David. But David was not without sin. One evening, he saw a beautiful woman, Bathsheba, from the roof of his palace. He desired her, even though she was married to a man named Uriah, a soldier in David's army. David took Bathsheba as his own, and when she became pregnant, he arranged for Uriah to be sent to the front lines of battle, where he was killed. God was displeased with David's actions. The prophet Nathan confronted David with a story that revealed the depth of his sin. David was heartbroken and repented before God. Though God forgave him, the consequences of his actions brought great trouble to his family. David's later years were marked by personal and political struggles, including a rebellion led by his own son, Absalom. Yet throughout his life, David remained a man after God's own heart. He wrote many of the Psalms, expressing his deep love and dependence on God, even in times of great sorrow and joy. When David's time to die approached, he passed the throne to his son Solomon, urging him to walk in the ways of the Lord. David's reign had lasted 40 years, and his legacy lived on far beyond his death. God had promised that one of David's descendants would reign forever. Centuries later, that promise was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, who was born from David's line. David's life, his faith, his victories, his failures pointed to a greater king to come, one who would establish an eternal kingdom. This is the story of David, a man of great faith, whose heart for God shaped the history of Israel and fulfilled the divine promise of a king who would reign forever.